I will call this meeting of the Lake Mills City Council to order for August 20th of 2024. Misty, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Curler?
Here. Here.
Thank you. Ms. Schmager?
Here.
Ms. Quidnow?
Here.
Mr. Fields?
Here.
Mr. Waters?
Here.
Thank you.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our next agenda item is Councilmember Board Reports and Acceptance of Meeting Minutes. So we have the City Council meeting minutes from our last meeting of August 6th and the Public Works Board meeting minutes from July 9th. Are there any comments or corrections on these 2 minutes?
Good.
Okay, seeing none, I will accept those minutes into our record. Our next agenda item is Joint Rock Lake Committee Monthly Report. I got an email today from Wendy Catalani-Davies that she's out of town and forgot to arrange for someone else to make the report, so we won't have anyone on that tonight. So our next item is correspondence. I'll go ahead and kick it off. I just had a few things since our last meeting. I got a Mill Pond update from the Parks Board. I received a couple of contacts regarding the Sandy Beach Restaurant, and I had a chance to attend the Ad Hoc Urban Tree Committee meeting yesterday. Mary.
I attended the RLIA annual meeting. Also received correspondence on Sandy Beach and some inquiries on E. coli.
Great, Greg.
Nothing further, thank you.
Okay. Michelle?
The only thing I have to add is a continued correspondence with a constituent on West Lake Street regarding tree lawn trees.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Fields, Steve.
I have nothing to add.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so now we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is questions and public comment. The public is encouraged to address the council at this time regarding items on the agenda. Public comments may also be made at this time for items that are not on the agenda if you have registered with the city clerk before the meeting has been called to order. The state's open meetings law discourages actions by the council on items that are not listed on the agenda. Please keep your comments limited to 3 minutes. State your name and address when starting your comments and fill out the sign-in sheet provided at the podium. If there's anyone attending online who wishes to speak, please type your name and address in the chat feature, and then the clerk will be able to identify you. So I know we have one gentleman who registered in advance. Mr. Gelden, would you like to come up?
Good evening. My name is Scott Golden, and I live at 427 West Lake Street. Tonight I'm seeking input from the City Council regarding the replanting of terrace trees on West Lake Street following the streets project that was completed in 2021. My concern is twofold. First is that since 2019, the 300 to 400 block of West Lake Street has estimated what I've estimated has lost 15 old growth trees, resulting in considerable loss in tree canopy, which is one of the elements that attracted us to the neighborhood. Prior to losing these trees, there were at least 6 locations by my count that were unplanted as well. Second, the delay in reaction time following the street project has cost at least 2 growing seasons. In comparison, the 500 to 600 block of College Street received trees immediately after the 2024 street project. I have observed that planting and other terrace tree maintenance is ongoing throughout the city where gaps in canopy exist or storm damage occurs. These actions demonstrate that this is a priority and funding is available, and I would like to see West Lake Street included and prioritized. The benefits of trees in urban areas cannot be overstated, I think we all understand, including reduced utility costs for residents, carbon sequestration, localized heat reduction, wildlife habitat, aesthetic appeal, etc. I have been in contact with Eric Schreiner on this matter since 2022. I was told planting would occur in spring 2023. When that did not happen, I reached out again for spring of 2024. Planting still did not occur. In June, I reached out to Michelle Quaidno to request assistance with moving this forward. I have still not received a definitive answer. Specifically, I would like to know if we can plan on seeing a planting this fall or next spring, 2025. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during public comment this evening? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone in the room or anyone online, so we will close the public comment period this evening, and we'll move on to the city manager's report. Maybe before we do that, let me just add, we don't normally make decisions or respond to public comment during the meeting, so we can certainly have someone get back to you on your questions. So the city manager's report, we've got a number of documents to look at. Drake, is there anything you'd like to highlight or to add?
Sure. The only thing I'd add is we were fortunate to receive a visit from Governor Evers just about a week ago. He came to tour CP Avenue, which we received STP funding for from the state of Wisconsin. So Lisa and I joined him for a walk and talk on the project, describing what the funding will be helping us with, the scope of the project, and talking in general about some other city issues, as well as the other projects that we've received state funding for as well. So he was excited to see the plan and the vision for that area, as well as that the city has received just under $2 million over the next 5 years on road improvement projects. So we were certainly happy to have the governor in the community to see what that grant funding can do for the benefit of our growing city, and thank him for his time and stopping by, and would welcome him back at any time to see some other great things going on in the city of Lake Mills.
Thank you, Drake, for highlighting that. And the governor's office reached out to you, is my understanding, right? So they were specifically trying to go to communities and learn how communities are using those state grants. So it was really nice to be included on the list.
Mm-hmm.
And Drake did an excellent job of giving the overview of how that project will benefit our community, and also the other things that we talked about to plan to plant some seed for other needs we might have moving forward. Any other questions or comments? We've got a number of financial documents, a police department report. Yes, Mary.
I'm just curious, I always find the police department report to be interesting, but I'm curious, is there a way to understand whether this is typical or we're seeing any increase in any particular area that might be an indication of a new problem that is arising that needs to be addressed?
I would expect that Chief Schroeder would specifically call out any areas of concern if he saw a trend in a direction that was concerning, but I can certainly talk with him about perhaps including some comparative data over time to show some trends and see if that might be possible to incorporate into the report.
Thank you. I will just note that I saw the parking complaints, and I know that we have the new service officer, which would, of course, that might be one of the reasons why that might go up. So there's probably a rationale often for some of the changes that we might see, but when I think about safety, which is one of our core elements in our mission, that if there was something, how would we know? How would we know? And so that would just be a little line item or something that would be of help.
Yeah, I think on that point specifically, I think you said it well. We do have more neighborhood services officer, greater presence, greater enforcement focus, specifically at Sandy Beach this year, and we have the staffing that's able to accommodate that as well. So that has led to an increase in parking citations, which has also led to an increase in people calling about their parking citations as well. But the inclusion of some budget capacity for those neighborhood/community service officers has resulted in increased capacity for enforcement.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Drake. So now we'll move on to council business. And we have 3 items this evening, and for all 3 of these, we've received information relatively late to tonight's meeting, so we're going to make sure that we take all the time that we need to go through the documents and ask all the questions and have all the information that we need before we make any decisions on these. So the first 2 are related to our borrowing. So the first item is Resolution 24-58, which is related to our general obligation borrowing. So Misty, would you read the title of that resolution, please?
City Council Resolution 24-58, resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of 2,940,000 general obligation promissory notes, Series 2024A.
Thank you. Would someone like to make a motion?
Can we go ahead and have discussion?
Sure. Sure, we can have discussion. And so we have a sale day report, and we have John Cameron from Ellers here. So, John, if you could walk us through the results.
I would be happy to. Good evening, everybody. And very pleased to walk through both sales today. So on the A issue, which is the first item on the agenda, we took bids at 10:30 this morning and had really great interest in the promissory notes, which led to really positive results for the city. Before I kind of dive into that, as part of the process, we did seek out a rating, which the city is currently rated with Standard & Poor's and has a AA- rating, which is a very solid credit rating, and that rating was affirmed as part of the issuance process. So really kind of a kudos to everybody here, but special thanks to staff, especially Sam, in terms of pulling all of the information together that goes into the official statement for this. And then there's a fair amount of work that goes into preparing for the rating call, including a list of questions that we get with relatively short notice from the rating agency. So really appreciate staff's efforts in terms of pulling that together, because that really helped, in terms of solid affirmation on the rating. And S&P did note, a stable outlook within the rating. I think, in terms of trends, just really good continued positive trends in terms of fund balance, in terms of really a lot of the financial metrics that are within the city's control, and then beyond items that are beyond your control in terms of just the trends in equalized growth, just general state of the economy. They're noting a lot of positives. So I think you're solidly in this category for right now, but if we see continued positive movement trend-wise, rating agencies are notoriously well known for being quick to move downward in terms of rating, but slow to move upward. So I think, there's a lot of good things in the rating report and things that, to continue to watch in the future. We received 7 bids, which is really fantastic. We like to see at least 3. So 7 is very strong and really partially, again, an indication of where, Lake Mills is, within the credit range standpoint, but also just a really positive in terms of the bond market itself. So a lot of interest. We had another sale this morning as well that received a tremendous amount of interest as well. So the true interest cost, or TIC, on the issue was 3.674%, a very close spread between the high and the low bidder on all of the bids that were received. As part of the winning bid, we received a premium on the offering, which we were able to use to partially downsize the issue. It doesn't affect the amount of money that's available for the projects. It just goes to cover some of the cost of issuance expense. We were also able to deposit roughly $173,000 into the debt service fund to help cover the 2025 interest payment and then a portion of the 2026 interest payment. So really great results. And the interest rates came in just a little bit better than what we had in the pre-sale report. So in terms of the coupons on the notes. So in total, the principal and interest payments over the life of the notes, the 20-year life of the notes, is just a hair over $250,000 better than what we showed the council last month when my colleague Lisa was here presenting the pre-sale report. So fantastic sale results. Congratulations to the city. Happy to answer any questions on this issue.
Are there any questions for John? Gary?
I would just note for whenever someone's ready to make their motion, the resolution was updated, so that amount in the title on the agenda, the 2995, because of that reduction is not the correct number, it's the 2940. The resolution is correct that's attached. Just wanted to point that out for when someone is ready for their motion.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 24-58, authorizing the issuance and sale of 2.94 million general obligation promissory note.
Second. Motion by Mr. Waters, seconded by Ms. Quednow. Is there any further discussion or questions? John, I just have a question on the various tables that have been provided. These are updated from what we would have had in the pre-sale report then to reflect the different interest rate
Yep,
that we
sale
were able
results.
to
Yep,
receive.
correct.
Okay.
Yep, and those interest rates are now locked in for the life of the notes.
Okay. And this is a new borrowing option that we have due to a change in state law doing promissory notes, right? So this is a 10-year span?
20-year.
This is a 20-year,
Yeah,
okay.
so under the old law, these would have been bonds. We would have been doing GO bonds. Under the new law, we can do general obligation promissory notes. So historically, in terms of repayment, anything 0 to 10 years in length were promissory notes. Anything over 10 up to 20 years in length were bonds. And the advantage to the city is really if you have unspent note proceeds after the projects are completed. Under the old law where we were issuing bonds, you had to issue by purpose and then in total. So if you had unspent proceeds in the road section or street section, you had to then use it for an in-kind project. With geo-promissory notes, you have maximum flexibility. You can use, if you have unspent proceeds, you can use them for any public purpose project. So from an administration standpoint, and then just also from a general flexibility standpoint, it's really been a nice change to the law. Plus, you don't have to do all of the initial resolutions when you authorize, which I don't think anyone is complaining about all of the extra items on the agenda. So also a nice kind of side benefit.
For sure. For sure. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please, on Resolution 24-58, which is authorizing the issuance and sale of $2,940,000 in general obligation promissory notes, Series 2024A.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Ms. Quednow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. So our next agenda item is Resolution 24-59, which is authorizing issuance and sale of utility mortgage revenue bonds, Series 2024B. So, Misty, would you read that title for us?
City Council Resolution 24-59, a resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of $1,400,000 sewerage system and light and water utility mortgage revenue bonds, Series 2024B of the City of Lake Mills, Jefferson County, Wisconsin, and providing for the payment of the bonds and other details with respect to the bonds.
Thank you. So let's do the same as the last item where we have John go through everything and then we can get a motion.
Sure. We took bids on this issue at 10:30 this morning as well. Received great interest on this issue too. So received 6 bids, which is really a very healthy number. As part of this, the utilities rating was affirmed at the A- level, and like the general obligation level rating, it's the feedback we got from the rating analyst coming out of committee was that they foresee the city to be solidly in this rating category for at least the time being, but ideally, I think we'd like to see this rating tick up at least 1 notch. Typically, what we see with utilities relative to the general obligation rating is kind of a 2-notch differential between the general obligation rating and the utility rating, so we're 3 notches here. So we'd like to eventually see that move, which is kind of what we expressed to utility, to the committee, but there's, again, some good trends financially within the utilities, just like the general fund. So I think if we continue to see trends in audits year over year, eventually the utility will get there as well. The true interest cost on this issue was 3.982%, which is really a fantastic interest rate for utility revenue bonds. Utility revenue bonds are, in terms of the kind of the security level, general obligation debt, in terms of the underwriting community, those who are purchasing the debt, is generally the safest form of debt because there is an irrepealable property tax levy behind that. Utility revenue bonds are kind of 1 notch below that because you're relying on the revenues, in this case of all 3 utilities, to be able to pay operating and maintenance expenses, and then the amount of cash that is left over has to be at least 125% of the principal and interest payments for the life of the debt. But because we're relying on revenues of the utility, which are just maybe 1 notch below in terms of hierarchy, tax revenues, it comes generally with a little bit higher interest rate, but not much higher in this case, which is really fantastic results for the utilities. Like the A issue, we were also able to downsize this issue. We were able to downsize it by $45,000, which again does not affect the amount of cash that's available for project expenses, goes to pay cost of issuance related items. The interest expense came in lower than what our pre-sale estimate was. About $114,000 lower than pre-sale estimates, which really is kind of indicative of where the market is starting to head, which is really a positive trend overall. But in total, over the life of these bonds, we're about $160,000 to the better compared to what we showed last month in the pre-sale report. So really positive sale result, and congratulations on another fantastic sale here. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for John? Greg?
John, the interest rate on the utility is a little bit higher. Is that due to it being a utility, or does the rating also have an impact on that? What's your thought?
Maybe a little bit of both. It's primarily due to being a utility. You would tend to see even if the rating was the same, revenue bonds come with a little bit higher interest rate, recognizing there's a little bit added risk level with revenue bonds compared to general obligation debt compared to the for the underwriting community. So that's what I would primarily attribute it to.
Okay, thank you. I know you touched on it a little bit prior, but I just wanted to touch base a little bit more on that. Thank you.
Yep, you bet.
John, I had another question for you. As we're looking ahead, we're anticipating some significant expenditures for either upgrading or building a new wastewater treatment plant. And I'm just wondering if you mentioned that our rating is a little bit lower than with the
general obligation.
General obligation. And I noticed in the rating report, they specifically say we do not anticipate raising the rating in the next 2 years. So I'm just wondering if there's anything we should be concerned about there, any steps we should be taking to try to get ourselves into a more advantageous rating before we might have some larger expenditures.
Sure. So within the ratings matrix that Standard & Poor's uses for utilities, the 2 heaviest weighted criteria are number of days cash on hand and debt coverage ratios. So those are kind of two items that utilities can somewhat control. I mean, you're on the electric and on the water side, you're in a regulated environment with the Public Service Commission, so there's only so much you can do rate-wise. But, the saying, cash is king, it does apply to the rating category here. So the more cash and the number of days cash on hand you have within the electric, the water, and the sewer utilities, the better you look to the rating agencies. The other factor is that debt coverage ratio. So the way that works is annually you look at the total revenues coming in this case for all three utilities. And then you subtract out your operating expenses, and that's net of depreciation. So it's true operating expenses, salaries, chemicals, electricity, those types of expenses. And the amount of cash that you're left with after you pay your operating expenses has to be at least, again, from a covenant standpoint, 125% of the annual principal and interest payments on all your revenue bonds. But the higher that ratio is, the better. So that's another, factor to help control. So it goes to just number one, overall level of indebtedness, which to the extent you have heavy capital expenses, that's out of your control. But to stay ahead of rate increases is within your control. So that would be kind of my message on that in terms of, controlling those metrics. The other would be to do, long-range planning in a more formalized type setting that we could then turn around and submit to Standard & Poor's. And that's something that we can certainly help with, in the near term, as you're gearing up for these projects to take and present that to S&P and say, here, we do have some heavier expenses, but here's our plan. And here's the timing of rate increases and when we're going to be going into the PSC. Here's what we anticipate the magnitude of the rate increases to be. Here's where we track our reserves relative to we actually can track it against their standards and show kind of where we're going to be over time. And those are kind of the three most proactive things I think you could do, as you look to the future. But even with big expenses, having a plan and getting ahead of it, I think you'd still stay solidly within this rating category. I wouldn't worry about negative pressure that way. And, I know for big ticket projects, like say on the sewer side, the state's loan programs have kind of been the path for the city in the past, and certainly it would be really good options. Those are not rated. They do count against your overall level of indebtedness when you do go in for a rating or during surveillance ratings, but, having a plan, being forthright with S&P, I think the feedback we got is you're pretty solidly in this category right now, and, if we continue to trend upwards on some of these financial metrics, maybe we'll move, but the big ticket capital expenses may outweigh the positive and keep you solidly in this rating category for the time being.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate those ideas for things that we can do, and it seems to me that those actions are beneficial anyway, even if they don't.
I was going to say, those things
it's a good
you probably
idea to
would be
have a
doing
plan,
anyway.
good idea to stay on top of, having appropriate rates and that kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's things that the city has done historically, things the city will continue to do from a management side. Again, that's been, real positive in the rating report, so kudos to staff in terms of the great job they do, because that's, certainly highlighted in the credit rating and the analysis. So all things you would do to get ahead of a project or series of projects anyway.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions for John or comments on this item? Okay, and this one was also, the sale amount was lowered, so it's $1,400,000, is that correct? So would someone like to make a motion on Resolution 24-59?
I move to approve Resolution 24-59. I was looking at the wrong one. Sorry about that. Okay, now all right. Pause. I'm sorry.
That's right.
because, thank you. All right, I move to approve Resolution 24-59, the resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of $1,400,000 sewage system and light and water utility mortgage revenue bond series 2024B.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Quidnow and a second by Ms. Schmager. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please, on Resolution 24-59, which is authorizing the issuance and sale of utility mortgage revenue bonds, Series 2024B.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thanks,
being
John.
here this evening, John. Okay, our next agenda item is Resolution 24-60, which is approval of Sandy Beach Restaurant construction referendum question. So Misty, would you please read that title for us?
City Council Resolution 24-60, authorizing Sandy Beach Restaurant construction referendum question for the November 5th, 2024 ballot.
Thank you. So we have a prepared resolution that requires a dollar amount to be filled in at the bottom of the first page. I would suggest that we have staff go through the results of the construction bidding process and kind of guide us through how we can guide our discussion to reach that number.
So if you look at the other attachment that was handed out, it is included in the online packet. Steve, if you are on the website, you will see there were 2 bids received. The highlighted section of that spreadsheet that you have in front of you is the apparent low bidder. You see it broken down by base bid and then each alternate across the top. As you go from left to right, those alternates are bidding on each other, are building on each other. And so when you get to the end after alternate 6 and you see the total there, that's if you picked every single alternate, the price would be $2,740,710. As you move down, that's just for the construction contract. As you move down, you'll see the other costs associated with the development of the Sandy Beach Restaurant. So you'll see the 5% contingency, which is the recommended amount for new construction. So then you have to add in that. The design, construction, administration contract, that's our current contract with Thrive Architects. So that we would roll into the long-term borrow and capitalize that cost. That was just under $119,000. The electric service does need to be upgraded from the single phase that's currently there to the 3-phase. So that's $145,000. We would incorporate that into the borrow, but that would be completed by the electric utility and its annual contractor that wins its contract for services. So then that brings you down to the third kind of grouping of McKee Associates and Level Up to show you on the base bid, if you picked no alternates, the apparent low bid of $2,713,064.50. The final 2 rows there are the estimated principal and interest payments at a 6% interest rate from the state trust fund loan. So this is as complete of a financial picture as we can give to you as you prepare to select which options you'd like to incorporate into the ultimate referendum question. As I stated at the very beginning of this process, this is also the council asked to know when you are at a decision point and when your off-ramp, so to speak, is. This is one of your off-ramps if you choose not to proceed with the project. You can choose not to go to referendum at this point in time, which would then obviously either delay or the council could decide that it's no longer pursuing a restaurant facility at Sandy Beach and change its course. So if there's any questions, the architect is, Jeff Stowe is online if there's questions of him. We do have the state calculator up, so if you choose what options you want to add, we can add it in and give you back information on principal and interest payments and what that would look like if you're interested in that information. We are at a decision point. If we do want a referendum, it's 70 days before the election, which is August 27th. So if for some reason the council is not comfortable acting tonight, you will need to call a special meeting before August 27th in order for us to send the referendum question to the county for inclusion on the ballot in November.
Okay, thank you, Drake. I wonder if you could also just remind us, going across the top, the first line, what are those different alternatives? Just remind us what those items are.
So the Lula is the kind of the lowest level elevator, if you will, to make the second floor ADA accessible. The expanded second floor, if you remember the mezzanine level, this would make it add some square footage up there. Perhaps add some capacity for meeting space, not large meeting space, but certainly for a business lunch or something to that effect. Add a little bit more square footage to the second floor.
Was alternate 2 the exterior where
Yeah, thank
alternate
you.
3 is the
Yeah,
interior?
alternate 2 would have been the exterior deck, the expanded exterior deck. Alternate 3 is the expanded interior mezzanine. That got cut off in there. So if you'll remember, the side deck of the exterior is not included in the base bid, just the decking that is along the lakeside.
Right, okay.
The boardwalk would have been that space that was underneath the proposed expanded deck facility that kind of went into the beach. That was the wooden boardwalk look added feature. Jeff, can you explain the standing seam?
Yes, that would be an alternate for going from a membrane roof to a standing seam roof, which would more or less be an aesthetic feature and perhaps a little bit longer lifespan on that. But, the membrane roof would be a durable roof that would have like a 30-year warranty.
So we would, it's likely we would only select the standing seam option if we did not choose the solar panel array, since the aesthetics would be covered up with the solar panels.
Correct. In either case, with the slope of the roof, it's designed to function with either the membrane roof, where you could elect to do the solar array later if you choose to, and you'd still have the functionality. It's basically purely an aesthetic look to it, going to the standing seam.
Okay, and then obviously the final alternate is the inclusion of a solar array on the roof of the restaurant.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Jeff or for staff? Mary?
I have a question. How, I think on the referendum, we also have the school board coming up with a large ask, and so just curious how we educate taxpayers on the impact. Let's just say whichever we choose, if we choose a dollar amount of an approach this evening, how do we let them know what kind of impact it has to them as a citizen?
Mm-hmm. We can publish information on, how it'll affect the debt levy and how that would correspond with any increase on the average of an average value home. So we can publish information like that. Since this is advisory, I am not an expert on referendum law. I do know that when you are doing statutorily required binding referendums, like exceeding your levy limit or something to that effect, you are limited in the type of information you can provide, meaning that you cannot lobby for its passage. You can only speak to what the effects are if you pass it and if you don't. I don't know if that applies to advisory, so I'd have to do more information do more research before we published any information. But I imagine that our educational piece will be largely limited to what the restaurant would provide and then how it would impact at a home value level, what someone would be paying as a portion of their tax bill would be going towards this.
So just as a follow-up, it sounds like you're anticipating maybe some kind of a fact sheet or something that would be on a city webpage that would summarize some of the key facts.
We could issue a press release. We could do social media posts, but I imagine we would at least create a landing page on the website that is showing what is being proposed, what would the community receive if the referendum was, if the project went forward. I don't want to tie it to the referendum because it's advisory. So if the project goes forward, here's what would occur. And if the borrowing occurred at the proposed rate, how it would impact an average single family home in the city of Lake Mills. So those are the three avenues. We could utilize our Facebook page, issue a press release, and then create a landing page on the website for general information.
I like the idea of especially having some kind of a schematic that shows, whatever we end up choosing, if we choose something this evening, so that people can kind of visualize what it's going to look like, because I think that helps them rather than just having that dollar amount and then what the features would be. Let's say we choose all of these, then we would list all of those features that would be included, for example. Michelle?
Am I understanding correctly that we would not need to include both alternate 5 and alternate 6, that's more or less a choice?
Correct. You don't need to pick both. As Jeff said, the standing seam alternate is an aesthetic choice, so the council may not see value in picking the more aesthetically pleasing roof if it will be covered with solar panel arrays. You may want to choose that if you don't choose the solar array and decide to pursue that project at a future date. It's an aesthetic choice, so it's not, the functionality of the roof will perform similarly.
Any other questions or comments? Greg?
Yeah, I don't recall that standing seam discussion, to be honest. Was there drawings or anything to that effect in the past?
I think we added it in to provide, because of the solar array discussion. Jeff, can you add any more insight?
Yeah, I think our initial design, when we did our preliminary budget, included the standing seam, and the last go around at the end of June, early July, we were looking for some cost saving measures. So that was why we put in the alternate as the standing seam, to provide another, dollar amount alternate if you choose not to do the standing seam roof.
So I believe the concept drawings they would have seen would have been the standing seam. So any of the renderings would have included the standing seam roof. Correct, Jeff?
Yes, correct.
From the original June.
Correct.
Plans, okay. I have a question, or maybe, Drake, if you could clarify the three-phase electric. So it sounds like we would need to do an electric upgrade to accommodate the restaurant building. If we did not move forward with a restaurant, would we still need to do that kind of an upgrade for some of the other phases of Sandy Beach redevelopment? I mean, is that a cost that we will have to incur regardless?
Generally, I believe the answer is no. Dwayne, do you have any further insight to add to that?
Greg, I would say the only thing that would come to concern would be depending on what what is done with the parking facility, whether or not that, if we look to do remote parking payment options, I believe that probably would not require a three-phase, but I would defer to our electric department to confirm. But I think the three-phase is mainly for the restaurant itself, yes.
Okay.
The only other concern would be the lift station, but that that's in the CIP for, I believe, 26. But that lift station is already currently served, so I would be surprised that we would be changing the service there. Again, we can confirm that with the electric utility.
So it sounds like you're talking about the other infrastructure, sewer and water. There is sufficient electrical support for that, for the
We
work
believe
that.
so. We'd have to confirm that, but
Okay.
there's a lift station there currently. It's served adequately by the electric that exists now. And I would be surprised if a remote parking feature would require three-phase electric, but I can't answer it definitively.
Okay, and that's okay. I'm just trying to, kind of understand whether we would need to do that cost or not. And if we would scale down to a shelter with a kitchen or something, would that require that cost, if we know?
Likely not. In general, the lower intensive usage is gonna, probably can get by with single phase. A park shelter is gonna be more of a seasonal use. It's not gonna have a year-round load on it. It's not gonna have extended hours on it. It's not gonna be running the same commercial appliances and commercial loads that would be required by the restaurant facility. So, again, not being able to say for certain, I think it's likely the electrical demands of a typical park shelter or even a robust park shelter will be significantly less than the restaurant facility.
Okay, thanks. And I won't hold you to it again. I'm just trying to kind of wrap my head around, that was a cost I wasn't anticipating, and just trying to think about, depending on how we move forward, if we would have that cost or not. So thank you.
Now, we can't calculate it now. Some of that $145,000 may come back to us in what's called embedded costs. So after a developer receives increased services because of what they required, there's an assessment done on how much of that improvement benefited the system as a whole, and then a rebate is given to the customer, which in this case would be the city. The utility may issue a rebate back in some amount, that some portion of that is found to have benefited the entire system. So that 145, some of that may come back to us, but the city, as the quote-unquote developer, is responsible for the installation.
For the upfront, okay. Steve?
Drake, just as an example, being that this is a advisory referendum, say we picked all the options and moved forward and we had a positive response to this, we are not at all entitled to do everything. Once we sat down, we could tweak this or take a few items off here if we wanted to down the road, correct?
That is correct. The referendum is purely advisory. After you receive that information from the public, the city council is free to do as it wishes, with no constraints placed on it by the result of the referendum.
Thank
No
you.
legal constraints, I guess I'll say.
Greg?
Can we touch base on the bidding process? Is this bids that were, would there be more of a bidding process? Or is this just for the referendum discovery here, or is?
The bid specs required them to hold these bids until mid-December. So these are the bids that we have. They're the bids that we will act on following a referendum if we choose to pursue it. So no, it won't be bid again.
Okay.
I know Michelle had her hand up, but just as a quick follow-up to that, the level up is the low bidder, so we would be required to go with that contractor if we decide to go ahead with the project, right?
Correct. The city is obligated to go with the lower responsive bidder. Both McKee Associates and Level Up have been deemed to be responsive. So you would be obligated to go with the lower of the two.
Okay,
But you're not awarding it tonight.
got it. Michelle, did you have your hand up before?
I did, but I answered my own question.
Okay.
Can I ask a clarifying question about going with the lowest of the bid? If we elect to remove any of the alternatives, it changes who is lowest? So how does that work in a situation?
I'm looking at the alternatives. I don't think any of them will push the Level Up to be the high bidder.
They're only,
If you picked only alternative 5 and alternative 6, that may do it. I'd have to add it up. But then if that was the case, you would be required to go with the low bidder
okay,
of all of the options that you've chosen.
gotcha. Thank you.
So it's a package deal.
That's a good point, but right, most of the individual items Level Up was a low bid, but not all of them.
Not
So
all of
yeah,
them.
the math could work out differently depending on what we would choose. Okay. Any other questions?
Can I ask a math question?
Sure.
Okay. Looking at the bottom, total cost, principal plus interest based on the final with all alternatives, noting that there's the two bids, the bottom one being the one that's going along with Level Up. Correct? If I take out alternative 5, since that seems to be a aesthetic and not a function, which in my opinion is secondary to the other things, those other things are functional. It comes to $5,537,510.
Not quite. So let me just explain those numbers down there.
Please do.
So these numbers are the principal and interest costs, and then you add in 20 years of principal and interest payments. So if you don't pick something, you would lower it by that alternative amount as well, but then Sam would have to calculate what savings you'd have on the principal and interest payments as well. So it would go down further. The more you remove, the more that number will reduce because you're paying less over time as well, not just the upfront amount.
So the last number of the first line and the second highlighted line, I'm going to say it that way because it's easier to look at. Those are the amounts that we would potentially put in the resolution.
The middle highlighted line.
Yeah. At the very end, the total.
Yep, so this is where it gets.
Obviously, depending on the options, but if I was going to reduce, or if I was going to take out.
So it's not a perfect answer because you can, as you go from left to right, it's assuming that you're adding in each alternate as you go from left to right. So if you choose some but not all, those numbers will change. We'll have to add those up for you on the fly.
Okay.
But the second highlighted row that you see, if you picked base bid and alternate 1, that $2,870,144.50, that would be the amount that goes into the referendum.
Okay, I get that now. So if I was to, I'm trying to figure out the total amount here that would go in the resolution, okay? That's what I'm trying to figure out and also make sense of it. The alternative, if I were to add up all the way to alternative 4, where it says $2,984,384, and then how much would it be if we did not do the sanding seam?
So the number that would go into the referendum, if you picked everything up to and including alternative 4, would be $2,984,384.50. I would need to ask Sam to calculate over a 20-year period what the total amount that the city will have paid at the conclusion of the loan, when that loan is completely paid. I don't have that number for you, but that is what would go in the resolution.
However, I wanted to do also alternative 6. So I can't just follow the line
You're right.
down. I have to ask Sam to help me.
Yep, so
Sam, can you
Sam,
help?
if you've got the calculator, can you add the 81,400 to the 2,894,384.50?
And while she's doing that, so just trying to think about how we reach a decision here, we're kind of talking about, almost like an informal motion is what I feel like, where somebody can say, okay, I'd like to propose that we go with, the base plan and alternatives,
That's what
whatever,
I'm
X,
looking
Y, Z. And then we see if we reach consensus on something, and then they can tell us what the dollar amount is that would go with that in a resolution. And I suppose really one council member could do that. Okay, here's what I'm going to propose, so I'd like to
It's
propose
basically making a motion, yeah.
making a motion with that dollar amount to go with it. But I think we do want to be clear to make sure we all understand, and for people who are listening, what alternatives we're choosing.
I hear what you're saying, and I listened to what Steve said about we can put forth a resolution with a certain dollar amount and then make decisions after. So I'm thinking about what you're saying, and I'm thinking that if I put out or if I put in an amount, how we do that is going to be figured out later.
Can we utilize, and I don't know if you can do this in referendum, but to authorize the borrowing expenditure no more than X?
They're not, you can phrase the question that way, yes. But you are not asking them to authorize you to, you're asking, should we do this?
Yes.
You're not asking so you're asking for an opinion, but not permission.
Yes.
So you would say, should the city authorize up to an
Yep.
amount? Yes, you could
Yep.
do that. But no change to the language prohibits the city council from making any decision it wishes to following the referendum.
Because I think that's, I mean, if we're not, well, we can go, I don't know if we're going to go through every line item and eliminate some things, but there is a possibility that if we could authorize the borrowing and expenditure no more than, and let's just choose the highest, which would be adding them all across, no more than 3.2 million or whatever it would be when you added, level up all of the options, that would be the maximum. Which just would give the worst case indication to the public of saying, should we build this? And this could be the highest amount that we would need to borrow. And I don't know if that's helpful or not to go in that direction, but just a thought as we're trying to pick through the numbers.
Sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Just follow up what Mary was just saying is, what Michelle was saying by going with 1 through 4 and then throwing 6 on there, ultimately would be the worst case scenario, because you wouldn't do the standing seam if you were planning to do solar array right away.
Yeah.
So by doing that one, which is going to come in, just under 3.6 or 3.06. That's probably our worst case scenario anyways. And like Drake said, we're not asking for permission, we're just asking for their opinion. Hopefully they give us good guidance, we get good feedback, and then we just got to sit down and crunch the numbers and figure out where we want to go with it. So I don't think we need to read too much into it at this point. We will have a busy November and December if this moves forward.
Yeah. Steve, one thing I wanted to clarify, and maybe I didn't understand your question earlier, Steve, quite the same way that others did, but I thought you were asking about, if we put a dollar amount in the referendum language based on, choosing certain alternatives, can we later, after the referendum, scale back on some of those alternatives? And I think that the answer was yes, we can.
Correct.
But
May I give you an example?
I guess one thing I'm just trying to think through in my head is if we put a dollar amount, and it's a limitation of doing a referendum. It's a yes, no, it's not a multiple choice. So we're not able to ask our constituents if they want all these added alternatives or not. We're only able to say, here's this, net proposal with whatever alternatives we choose. And that's it. Yes or no, do you want that? So that's the downside, I think, of our process is if we put something out there that's $3 million, we might have had an alternative for $2 million that some people might say yes to, and they might say no to $3 million, so we won't really be able to tease that out.
I understand what you're saying. When looking at all of the alternatives in the grand scheme of it all, the fact that there is a choice between the two options for the roof is what made me think about eliminating one of those options.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's worst case scenario, but that's, I think, in our best interest. We don't want to go too low and then go, oopsies. So, Sam, do you have that number?
So we're talking about the base bid plus alternatives 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
And then
Steve.
Steve.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Steve had raised.
Yeah, Steve, go ahead.
No, I believe, Michelle, you're spot on. I guess the way I look at this, and I'll be perfectly honest, the only one that I'm looking at is the solar array. I know that number of 79,000 was thrown out there last time. I guess if we did get this to move forward, that's the only one that I would question down the road is, what is the payback on that? What is the investment? What is the maintenance? That's the one thing that's kind of an unknown. I know what I'm going to get for square footage. I know what I'm going to get for appliances and layout and, walkway, boardwalk. But the solar array, this number was just thrown out there. We don't have any information on it. So in my mind, that was the only thing that could walk back later if we did take the approach that Michelle suggested, which I think she's spot on with this 1 through 4 and 6, because it gives us our worst case scenario for a reasonable amount.
Thanks, Steve.
The only other information I'd provide, and this isn't a decision for me to make, is referendum can only tell you the public's opinion on the question that you ask. And so it is, you can assume, I guess, from a financial perspective, that if the community is willing to pay $3 million, that they're willing to pay $2.8 million, $2.9 million if you take something out. What you can't learn is how important a feature was to them in educating or informing their vote. So this is an imperfect process. As you stated, it's not multiple choice. So, you could add in, all, 1 through 4 plus 6, and you could have someone that votes no but would have voted yes if it was just the base. So those are the types of those nuances you're not going to be able to pick up from the referendum. So that is just as much guidance as I can give you on that piece of this process.
Would it be, following up on Mary's initial question about, communication, I would assume it would be reasonable for our outreach materials to identify the different features and what their individual costs are, similar to what we have here, so that the
Yes, we can.
Voting public understands the pieces that went into the number.
We can give information on what's included in the base. We can break it out exactly as you see it here and what adds up to the cost that's in the referendum question, so that people can understand what went into the amount that they're being asked if they support for the construction of this facility. So yes.
Can I ask a further clarifying question regarding the way that this is being asked to the city? This is an investment on top of what we have already budgeted, is that correct or no?
We haven't borrowed anything for this project, so this would include all long-term debt associated with the development of a restaurant facility. Any other Sandy Beach improvements that have occurred to this point are not included. So
Right.
like the boat launch, things like that won't be included in this number. This is only the cost associated. It does include, and it will include some of the dollars you've already spent associated with Thrive, because we're rolling that into the borrow to capitalize it. So in that sense, yes, you've spent a certain percentage of that 118,950 contract with Thrive, that those dollars have been encumbered, even if we haven't cut the check yet. But that would be it.
I seem to recall that we had like 2 million put aside in our budget for the specific
Never borrowed
project.
it. So
Oh, we
those-
haven't borrowed
those
it yet,
numbers-
we just
that-
budgeted for
Right,
it.
that was included in the CIP, but it was never realized.
Okay.
So, no, the community, the taxpayer is not paying principal and interest on what was included in that CIP.
Okay,
That was our estimate, so this replaces that in a sense.
thank you.
Any
Your
updates now?
totals with that option, 1 through 4 plus 6, would be $3,069,854.50, with a total principal and interest of $273,747, round up, estimated. And do you want the final after 20 years?
Can you go back and just
Start over.
Yeah, please, there's a lot of numbers.
3 million.
The main thing we want is the number
69,000.
that's going to go in the referendum.
3.070, basically.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So,
I took 1 through 5,
1 through 4.
or 1 through 4 plus 5.
Gosh, what happened to
Got
the
it.
1.7 estimate on the base?
Or 6.
I am just
Yeah.
struggling that this is like twice the amount.
29, 843.
While we're waiting for clarification on that, well, I guess it doesn't really matter. I'm curious, like Mary just said, how did the base number go up by, quite a bit? And is there, maybe are we paying for the privilege of holding those bids open and the uncertainty that represents for the contractor? I don't know.
There certainly is. The contractor's taking on risk by holding their prices open.
I went
Because
back
they're
up to the
not
first one.
acquiring materials, they're not scheduling staff, they're not taking the steps they need to mobilize in order to be sure that they can do it. So yes, making them hold their bids open likely increased cost. We only received 2 bids. We would have liked to see more.
It's 290.
Same.
They were pretty close, so.
We would have liked to see more, so that indicates a less competitive environment than we would have liked. We are on a tight time frame for receiving bids. That likely plays into it as well. So those factors may have contributed to the higher pricing than the estimates stated.
So we want to make sure we get this number right tonight, so I think however long it takes to get it right, because we're going to be making an official decision to get this referendum language, so hopefully we can.
My intention is to find out that number, amend it, and then we can vote on the amendment.
So you making a motion?
Not yet, not till I get that number. I mean, I could use your number, but I want it to be official. I trust you, and I want to make sure it's official.
And again, Drake, while we're waiting, the number that goes in the referendum is not the total cost with principal and interest over 20 years, correct? It's just the borrowing, which does not include interest, any interest. Okay.
That's correct.
right.
That's just informational.
Okay.
I believe my numbers are correct. So it'd be $3,069,854 with principal and interest of $273,747.
I'm sorry, 273.70.
747. So just rounded up to 2738.
And you don't have that over 20 years.
Okay,
What
so,
that comes to?
$5,474,954.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the number again?
Which one?
The one that I would basically be putting into the resolution?
That would be the $3,069,854 854.
Okay,
Round it up.
yep, gonna do that. I wasn't sure if I should include the interest and all that into the total, so that's why I sought clarification.
I was just giving you the principal and interest payment, so you knew what it would be annually
Okay,
for that amount.
got it. Thank you. All right,
All right.
I'm gonna-
Somebody is going to make a motion here?
yeah, I'm gonna make a motion to amend Resolution 24-60, authorizing Sandy Beach Restaurant Construction Referendum question for the November 5th, 2024 ballot in the now therefore be resolved section where there is a blank dollar amount. I wish for it to say $3,070,000 for the construction and associated development expenses of a restaurant at Sandy Beach Park in the city of Lake Mills.
I'll
So,
second.
thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion by Ms. Quidnow and a second by Mr. Fields. Just a point of order, is this appropriate to say this is a motion to approve Resolution 24-60 with this number inserted?
I believe so, yes.
And is that what you understand the motion to be?
It is.
Okay.
So I don't need to amend it? I mean, I did, but, okay, I move to.
No, I just want to make sure everything's,
Got it,
everything's
okay.
all good, so, okay. So we have a motion by Ms. Quidnow, second by Mr. Fields, to approve Resolution 24-60 for the dollar amount of $3,070,000. Is there any discussion? Greg?
Yeah, my only concern is the inclusion of the solar array because of the issues that Mr. Fields had already addressed. Also, is it a Tier 1 manufacturer? What's the warranty? Those type of things. Break even is pretty important. My understanding is break even on these is over 10 years and the warranty will be less than that. Those are facts that we need to know a little bit more about. So the inclusion of that does create some concern and could create some negative feedback from the community.
Jeff, do you have any additional information you can provide on the solar array that I don't have in front of me?
Specifically, that would address what was brought up with either the council members' concerns here.
Jeff, can you speak up a little bit? It's a little hard to hear you.
Sure. I was just saying that I don't have anything specific to address either the council members' concerns specifically on their questions regarding the warranty and issues with the solar array that I can, address at this time.
I'm going to go back to the idea that, yes, there are questions and concerns. The amount is something we can work with in making that decision. So I feel like that's a decision for later, not necessarily one that we should be thinking about right now.
But it is included, yes.
Worst case
I
scenario.
would also add that we're talking about essentially $3 million, that the solar array itself is a small fraction of, sort of the overall cost. So if citizen who's voting on this, if cost is their concern, it's not that much more or less. But, as you said, it would be helpful, as you said, Greg, for us to learn more about the system and what the return on investment would be, what sort of grants might be available to help offset the cost, those kinds of things.
So, yeah, I realize we'll have a chance to review this later. And I guess as a council, we just need to assure ourselves that we'll do our due diligence on that aspect of it.
Any other comments, questions, discussion? I guess I'd just like to make one comment, and I've shared at a previous meeting that I have started to hear from some constituents who are concerned about whether we should be doing this project at all. But I'm not hearing from a lot of people yet, and I really do think the advisory referendum is the way we're going to know what the taxpayers think, not just what, people in the neighboring communities that maybe would come to the restaurant, but what, the people that we represent really think. So I'm in support of going ahead with this referendum so we can learn that and give them the opportunity to tell us that. And maybe people will be resoundingly in support, or maybe they'll be resoundingly against. And we'll learn more about that once we go through this process. Any other comments, questions?
I would just like to make a comment. So as a newer council member, I just want to say, thanks to city management and for all of those that have been working really hard to get us to the point where we actually have something to test out with our voters to see whether this is something that they have been telling us they have been wanting. I went back and read the survey data, and this restaurant has been a point of interest for many years. And so I just want to say thank you all it's been a lot of hard work getting here, and it's not easy. And I know some of the feedback has been, Michelle, you actually did a great job at one of our earlier meetings, kind of just framing it's not going to please everyone, but they can come and vote, and we'll then move on, whatever that looks like. But thank you for getting us to this point. It feels good to have a resolution coming forward. Well, if we vote yes, let's just say it. All right. So maybe that was just a little too far. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please, on Resolution 24-60, which is authorizing the Sandy Beach Restaurant construction referendum question for the November 5th, 2024 ballot with a dollar amount of $3,070,000.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, that is it for our council business this evening. Are there any recommendations for future agendas? Michelle?
I'd like an update on where we're at with the Century Building. I know that we've had some mumblings, but I just wanted to see where we're at with it.
Okay. I'll just toss out something that, not for the next meeting, but hopefully before the end of the year in January. I think when we went through our RFPs for the engineering and the planning, the council had expressed an interest in having them give sort of an annual report out. So I just ran across that the other day, so I thought I'd mention that again.
Yeah, I think October we're
Oh,
targeting.
okay.
I haven't spoken with them about it recently, but I think annually in October would be an appropriate time.
Sounds good. We'll trust your judgment on that. Mary, did you have a
I would just like a refresh on the wastewater treatment plant. Update.
And that's a good segue to tomorrow night's meeting, which is our work session where we'll be doing some goal setting. And so that's at 6 p.m. downstairs tomorrow evening. Food will be provided, and we have a consultant or two, I think, maybe. So there's a video that we all need to watch that Drake sent us. It's just about 3 minutes long, so it won't take too long. And then please refresh your memory on our strategic plan and on the implementation chapter of our comprehensive plan, and those are both attached to the agenda, so they'll be
We
handy
will
for
print
you.
copies as well
Oh.
to be at the meeting tomorrow night.
When was the video sent?
Just Friday.
Last week, Friday,
Last,
I
yeah.
think.
Can you resend it to me?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right, seeing nothing, we will call this meeting adjourned, and we'll see you all tomorrow.